Hi, my name is Rich Hatfield. I'm a senior conservation biologist for the Xerces Society and the project coordinator for the Pacific Northwest Bumblebee Atlas project. Thanks in advance for watching our training webinars. Please note that these webinars were recorded live and included question and answers from the audience. We've edited some of those answers and questions to make this a little bit more straightforward for those of you watching after the fact. Whether you're watching these for the first time or trying to get a refresher, we hope they'll help you learn how to participate in the Pacific Northwest Bumblebee Atlas and why it's important. If you have any questions, please feel free to follow up with us via email at bumblebees@xerces.org, or you can find more information on our website. Thanks again for watching. Enjoy the webinar. Most of what I'm going to be sharing for the next hour or so are a couple of videos that I've put together for you to see what it's like to conduct a survey. Normally, as part of these workshops, I would go out into the field and show you how to capture bumblebees and how to take pictures of them. We obviously can't do that today or tomorrow or anytime soon. So I made this video earlier this spring, and hopefully it will be helpful. Hi, my name is Rich Hatfield. I'm a senior conservation biologist for the Xerces Society, and I'm here to teach you how to do a survey for the Pacific Northwest Bumblebee Atlas or the Nebraska Bumblebee Atlas. They both have pretty much the same survey protocols. So I'm here today. I'm in a beautiful natural area. It's a nice, warm, sunny day. I've got my net and I have some vials in my pocket, so I'm pretty much ready to do a survey. The first thing you want to do is make sure that the site is big enough. It needs to be about a hectare. And a hectare is about the size of a football field, lengthwise, square. So sort of a football long and the same distance wide. It's 100 square meters, so a football field, including the end zones. Another way to think about it is the infield of a track. If you ever ran track, the entire infield on the inside of a running track is about a hectare. Or a soccer field is also about a hectare. So you want to make sure it's big enough. And then usually what I do once I decide that it's a big enough site is I walk around and I make sure that there's enough flowering resources. You want to make sure that there is something that bees could be visiting. Otherwise, it's probably not worth really conducting a survey, or maybe come back at a later date when there are flowers. One of the things you want to do when you're out pre-walking your site is make sure you're keeping an eye out for inconspicuous flowers. Sometimes flowers will grow down amongst the grass, but they can be important for bumblebees and often are. This plant is called self-heal and often grows underneath the understory or overstory of grass and is a great bumblebee plant. Another important thing when we're out looking for bumblebees is we want to make sure we're looking at all blooming plants. If I was standing here looking in this patch, I might be drawn to the violets, to the dandelions, or maybe to the bluebells over here. But in reality, one of the most attractive plants in this patch has green, inconspicuous flowers, but bumblebees love it. This is a plant called waterleaf, and the flowers aren't quite open yet because it's still very early in the season here. But these little green guys here are going to bloom into little beautiful little flowers that hang down sort of under the understory, and they often can't be seen. But bumblebees like Bombus flavifrons and other long-tongued species really love these flowers and will visit them. So while you may not be drawn to them with your own eyes, it's really important to pay attention to what's blooming and making sure that we're spending time looking at all the flowering resources on the landscape, looking for different species of bumblebees. Other things you may want to look for as you're doing a pre-walk around your site are things that may be a potential hazard. You may want to avoid plants like poison oak or blackberry, although it is notable that both of these plants do flower and can be attractive to bumblebees. You'll also want to look out for holes or other things to avoid, like electric lines, fences, barbed wire. Just make sure you're safe while you're doing your survey. You also want to keep an eye out for property lines to make sure you're not crossing from public land onto private land. And also keep an eye out for areas that you may want to spend a couple more minutes, areas with high quality forage that you know are especially attractive to bumblebees, Or keep an eye out for blooming trees, meaning don't forget to look up. There are sometimes flowers that are above your head that can also be attractive to bumblebees. Once you've finished your pre-walk, you're ready to start your survey. Materials that you want to make sure that you have with you before you begin your survey are an insect net, jars to place your bumblebees, a cooler with crushed ice. Make sure you have a timer. And then for processing your bees, you'll need your data sheets as well as a camera. We recommend having a dedicated camera, ideally with a macro function, but in a pinch, a smartphone can work as long as you learn how to control your white balance and take high quality photos with it. I typically set up a station in the middle of my survey area, which has the cooler and the area where I'll process the bees later. And then I grab a handful of vials and head out to go conduct my survey. And when you're conducting your survey, you want to make sure it's 45 minutes long, and that's 45 person minutes. So if you're doing it with a friend, you would do it for 22 and a half minutes. And if you did it with 2 other friends, it would be for 15 minutes. You just want to have 45 total minutes of search time. The important thing also is that when you're doing a survey, you want to pause the timer while you catch a bee. So it's 45 minutes of searching, not 45 total minutes. So you want to pause the timer when you catch a bee, and while you're putting that bee into a vial, and while you're putting that vial into the cooler. That doesn't count for your search time. The other thing that's important while you're doing your survey is you want to make sure that you're associating every bee observation that you have with a flower. So one of the important things about the Atlas project is we want to learn what resources that bees are using. So while you're out collecting bees off of flowers, you want to make sure to record that information so that we can gather it later and use that information when we analyze the data from the project. So with each bee that you capture, you want to also record the flower on which you captured it. Catching a bumblebee in a net is not an easy task. It takes a lot of practice. So one of the things that we recommend is that you spend some time practicing in your backyard before you go out and actually conduct your survey. That way you'll get some competency and some confidence so that when you see a bumblebee during your survey, you'll actually be able to net it. There are really 2 different ways to go after a bumblebee on a flower. One way is to just swing your net and try to catch it in there like this. The important thing is after you've swung, you want to make sure to turn your net over to close the bottom of it so that the bee doesn't come flying right out into your face. There's a number of ways to do that. I like to do a little flip, but the easiest way to do it is to swing and then just turn the net over 1-2 times. And then you'll have the bee in this section of the net that's laying over the top. The other way to go after a bee instead of sweeping is to just go over the top and drop the net on the bee like that. That way the bee will be trapped in the net. The next step then would be to grab the bottom of the net and pull it up to the top, and the bee will fly right to the top of the net because it's attracted to the sun. Let's see if we can find some bees to practice on. Sometimes you just have to go and follow for her a bit. She looks like she's looking for a nest, so they can be really hard to track. But we can just throw the net over the top of them like that sometimes while they're flying. And I got her. I can see her moving in the net there. So what I do is I pull the net then up to the top and make sure she's under there. I see her right in there, and then I can put her in the vial. Okay, so now that I have a bee in the net, what I need to do is get the bee from a net into the vial. And the way I'm going to do that, she's somewhere in this folded over area. can see her crawling around right here. And so what I want to do is make sure she gets all the way down to the bottom of the net. So what I can do is I can just take the net and just go back and forth a couple of times and then fold it over, and then I like to grab it when I know she's above my hand here. So I know that she's between my hand and the bottom of the net. And then I can take my jar, take the top off, but I want to keep that cap close by. And so then what I do is I stick the jar into the net, and it goes through my hand here, okay, so that there's no way for the bee to get out. And then what I can do is just sort of move the net around until I'm sure that I have the bee in the net. And unfortunately, my net is very dirty, so it's hard for me to see. But I can hear her. I know she's in there. And usually you'll hear that sound when you know she's in your jar. I know that she's in the jar. And now I can just use the net basically as the top of my jar. So I'm just going to reach my hand in, and again I'm going to grab that plastic vial, and I'm just pulling the top of the net over the top of the jar, so the net is still serving as the top until I get to the edge, and then I'm just going to slide it directly into and put the cap directly on, and then I can close the top and I can see the bee there in the jar. And that is how you transfer, or at least one method for transferring a bee from a net into a jar. Okay, so now I want to show you another method for getting a bee from a net into a vial. You can see the bees crawling around in the vial right here, and I'm sorry, in the net right there, and I want to get her into the vial. So one thing is a good thing to do. Some people just aren't comfortable holding the net while they do this, so they like to put it on the ground. But you can see if I hold the net straight up, the bee will fly all the way to the top of the net, okay? And then I can move forward. So some people just like to set it on the ground and then use the ground sort of as the cap, and then stick the vial into the net. And then again, same principle. You can pin the bee against the net as the top, and then you can stick your other hand in there and just put the cap on, and then you'll have the bee in the jar. Simple as that. And then what we want to do is we want to take the bee once it's in a vial, and we're going to put it into the ice pack. And it's ideal to stick it as far into the ice as we can so that the ice is completely surrounding the bee, and then it'll chill very quickly so that we can take the photographs that we need to take. Normally, one of the things that I would do in this situation is I would take the flower that I captured this bee on, and I would put it into the jar so that later when I was processing my bees, I could know which flower that I caught this bee on. And keeping track of that is very important for the data we're collecting for the Atlas project. Or in this case, because this bee wasn't visiting a flower, it was just flying around, it's not going to have any floral association. So if I don't put a flower in there, then I'll know that when I process my data later. But if I'd captured this bee on, say, a dandelion, I could come over to a dandelion flower and just grab the flower off and pretty easily just tuck the flower into the jar with the bee, and then later when I process this bee, I'd have the flower and the bee in the same jar so that I can keep track of it. Other people like to take notes and have a notebook, and they will number their vial and say this would be bee number 1. They could go bee number 1 and they would write down the flower, or take a picture of the bee next to the flower. There's lots of different ways to keep track of it. We don't care which way you do it, we just care that you do it. So when I finish my survey, I like to get a station set up to take my photographs. I want to make sure that I have everything I have and everything I need before I get started, because when I take the bees out of the cooler, they're going to start warming up, and I want to make sure that I have everything. So I want to make sure that I have my data sheet and a pencil that has lead in it. So I want to make sure I can take my notes. And I want to make sure that I have my camera. The other thing I like to do is make sure that my camera is set so the pictures I'm going to take are appropriate for the lighting conditions. So I usually will take a cap of a vial or something like that and make sure that I have my camera in the right settings before I get started, so I don't have to wait while the bee is warming up. So I get it in my macro setting and make sure that the pictures that I take look good. So here I am, I'm going to take a picture, and that looks pretty good. You can see here it looks pretty good. I could probably add a little bit of light. It's a little bit dark, so I may change the white balance a little bit, but for the most part it looks pretty good. So once I'm ready and I've got the information that I need, I can start processing my bees. But first I want to make sure I've filled out the top of my data sheet. So I have my site name and my grid cell ID in here, along with the date and the survey method, my weather information, and the surveyors and the survey time. All of that's entered on the data sheet, and I can get ready to enter the bees. Now each line on your data sheet here is going to represent a vial. So each bee that you captured gets its own line. So you're going to enter what bumblebee species that you think it is, its host plant, and then the photo numbers that you need, that you took of that bee. I'm going to move and process my bees in the direct sunlight here because it often will take a different picture, or a better picture, if you have direct sunlight. Sometimes it's too bright. You just have to take a look at the pictures that come out of your camera and adjust your settings and your location appropriately. And I can't stress this enough. I get way too many photos that people took that are out of focus, or are too bright, or are too dark. And if someone goes through all of this trouble of collecting bees, puts bees in jars and bees in the jars in a cooler, and then takes pictures that doesn't allow me to identify them, a lot of that effort has been wasted. So taking pictures is really the most important thing that you can do. And I want you to make sure to get your settings right and take the time you need to get the best pictures that you can. So I'm ready, my station's all set up, I have everything I need. I can grab my first bee out of the cooler. And once you take a bee out of the cooler, you'll know she's ready to be processed if you can kind of shake the jar back and forth, and she moves pretty freely in there. That's when you know she's ready to be processed. And so usually what I do is I'll just dump her out onto some surface, and if you have white, that's great, it works really well. Other colors can work too. Darker colors, just something that's flat and neutral usually helps pretty well. So one of the things that we can do when we look at our bee, remember there's a lot of different photos that I need. I need to be able to see the picture of the face. I need to be able to see a picture of the thorax. And I need to be able to see a picture of the abdomen, including all of the segments back there. And for yellow-faced, yellow-striped bees, I need to see a picture of the underside of the abdomen. That allows me to tell the differences between some very close look-alike species. So when they're completely out is a great time to take a picture of that underside of the abdomen if you have that species. And in this case, I do. So I want to get really close if you can, and this is why a camera with a macro setting is really the best option. You want to get as close as you can, and you want to take a nice picture of the underside of the abdomen. Okay, so now I can see the color of those hairs on the abdomen, which is exactly what I need to see. Also, when she's in this position, I can often take a very good picture of the face. And it's nice to take a nice close-up like this, because then I can see the cheek length, as well as the color of the hairs on her face and the colors of the hair on the top of her head. I also like to include a profile shot like this. Okay? And one of the nice things about a shot like this is I can see the hairs on the face, on the thorax, and on the abdomen. And now I want to be able to make sure that I can see every single segment on that abdomen and then the color patterns there. So you want to sometimes peel those wings apart and make sure you get a nice clear shot. It's okay if your hand is in there, but we really just want to be able to see all of the segments back there on the abdomen. Perfect. And then she's ready. I've taken all of the photos that I need for her. You can see there that her foot is starting to twitch a little bit and she's starting to wake up. But I've taken all the pictures that I can of her. And so what I can do is I can actually just set her in the sun and let her warm up. And she'll slowly warm up and groom herself and fly away. And then I can go on and process the next bee. But before I do that, I want to make sure I enter this one on my data sheet. So because this has a yellow face and a yellow stripe, and you notice that all the hairs on the underside there were black, I know that this is Bombus vosnesenskii. And if you don't know the species of bee that it is, it's totally fine. You can just write Bombus here. And I'm going to write the host plant. In this case, there is no host plant. I found this bee just flying around, probably looking for a nest site. So I'm just going to write nest searching. And then I want to write the photo numbers. So in my camera here, I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to open up, and I'm going to take a look at the photos that I took. And down here, it's going to tell me the number of the photo that I took. And I want to record that information on the data sheet. So these photos started at 2319, and I'm going to write that on here, and that goes through 2324. Okay, and now that's all the photos that I've taken of that bee, and I've entered all the information that I need to from that particular bee on the data sheet. Now I can process my next bee. Again, I can shake the bee in the jar, and if she moves around freely, I know that she's ready to be processed. I can dump her out onto the table. And again, this is not a yellow-faced, yellow-striped bee, so I don't need a picture of the underside of the abdomen. I just need a picture that shows the face, head, thorax, and abdomen. And I can get a lot of that from a single shot with this bee, the way that she's set up. I can get a nice profile shot. And there I can see pretty much everything I need to from a single photo. I'm going to roll her over on her back to make sure that I get a photo of the cheek length and of the face. Sometimes the antennae get in the way there, so you want to make sure, if you can, to get the photo that you need. Okay? So there, really, with just two pictures, I can get everything that I need. But there, in this case, I can also get a nice shot there that'll show me every segment of the abdomen. And this species here is Bombus mixtus. It's got brown hairs at the very back of its abdomen, that little crescent on T2 there. And you can see it's got cloudy hairs on its thorax. So a mix of yellow and black hairs and a nice short cheek. So I'm done processing that bee, and I can put her in the sun as well. So now I can write this one as Bombus mixtus. She was also nest searching. And the photo numbers, again, I go into my camera, I press preview, and this goes through 2327. So this is going to be 2325 to 2327. One of the things you can do when you're done processing your bees is you can actually hold them in your hands. It's a really neat opportunity to get up close and personal with a bee and see how they move their wings and groom themselves. It's a really, really neat opportunity. But they do warm up pretty quickly, and it's pretty neat to watch them fly away and notice that even after being in a cooler for a long time, they can go out about their business and just fly away. Oh, there she goes. When you're done with your bumblebee survey, we're going to ask that you also do a brief habitat survey. And there's just a series of questions that you have to answer as you walk around the site. There's some just basic site information at the top of the data sheet, and then we get into the habitat area. The first thing you want to do is decide what is the most appropriate habitat type for the place where you're doing your survey. And you're just going to circle one of those options. So in this case, I'm in a natural area, which is a park setting. So I would circle that. And then you would want to add in the habitat area of the surrounding area. So outside of your hectare, what habitat types do you see there? In this case, I see some woodlands and other areas. So I would include those in site in addition to the developed park that I'm also in. The next question asks you, how much of the survey area has flowering resources available? And what you want to do there is really just think about, as you did your bumblebee survey, how far did you have to walk before you saw another flower? Were there flowers pretty much everywhere? Or did you have to walk between patches? And how much area did those patches take up? And I don't mean like to be 100% flowering or even 50% flowering. It doesn't have to mean that flowers actually take up 50% of the ground or 50% of what you see. It's really just you can see flowers or look for bumblebees on flowers in 50% of the site at which you're standing, or whatever percentage it is. So how much is flowering? In a site like this, on a day like today, we're probably talking about sort of probably 15 to 20% at the most is flowering resources, as you see here behind me. Here are some examples of what different percentages of flowering resources might look like in the Pacific Northwest. And here are some examples of what it might look like in Nebraska. Then we want to know how many species of flowers that there are. Are there 1 to 2, 2 to 5, 5 to 10, or greater than 10? And by this time, you will have already done your bumblebee survey, so you'll have a pretty good sense of how many flowering resources there are out there. The next thing you're going to do is circle which features you see in the area. And these are all features that are important for bumblebee nests. So did you see any bunch grasses? In this area, I'm in a park that's probably occasionally mowed. There are no bunch grasses here, so I wouldn't circle that. Do you see evidence of rodent holes or tunnels? I did. Do you see any brush piles? Yeah, there's brush piles along the edge here, so I'd include that. There is a fair bit of bare soil here, so I'd include that. There's leaf litter in the woodland areas and along the fence rows here, so I would circle that. Do I see any pine needle duff? Well, in the area behind me here, there are some pine trees, and there is quite a bit of pine duff on the ground there, so I'd also include that. And I don't really see any rock piles here, so I would not circle that one, but those are what those options are. Those are all nesting areas for bumblebees, or areas or things that we think are important for nesting. The next question is all about management. Do you see any mowing here? In this case, I would answer yes, I do see mowing. There's no cattle grazing here, but there probably is some native grazing, maybe some deer. You might see some scat or some tracks, and you'd want to include that. There's no agriculture here. I don't think there's any insecticide or herbicide use, but I might ask the land manager if I had questions about it. There's no fire used here, and there are no honeybee hives. But your site obviously may be different, and you want to answer whatever it is that you have. And then on the back, you're just going to go around and you're going to list the plants that you saw in bloom, the common names, and if you know them, the scientific names, and then to help later, if you need to, you just want to record the photo numbers if you took a photo of those flowers. And that's it. The habitat survey should probably take you 15 to 20 minutes. If you have a lot of plants in bloom or you don't know your plants that well, it may take you a little bit longer. So make sure to leave yourself plenty of time. But we're hoping that this isn't going to be a several hour long habitat assessment. It should be fairly rapid, and you should be able to get through it fairly quickly, especially if you do it after you do your bumblebee survey, because you will have already walked the entire hectare property and you should know the features pretty well by that time. But that's it. When you're done with that, you're done with your bumblebee survey, you're done with your habitat survey, and you can head home and enter your data. So anyway, thanks for being out in the field with me today, and thanks for participating in the Bumblebee Atlas projects. I really appreciate all your help. I couldn't do it without you. I'm sorry that we weren't able to be in person today and share bees together, but hopefully you learned something and feel more confident when June comes around and we can get out in the field and hopefully do our surveys. But again, I do want to remind you that I'm filming this in April, and this is a rapidly evolving situation. So really, please do pay attention to the health professionals in your area and pay attention to your local and state officials about what is safe for you. And also, please pay attention about your own personal safety. That is the most important thing, and there's no reason to jeopardize your personal health for any reason to go out and do bumblebee surveys. If you need to, go do a bumblebee survey in your backyard if that's the safest place for you to do it. We want to make sure that everybody is safe and healthy during this difficult time. But anyway, thanks for your attention, and we'll look forward to seeing you out in meadows looking for bumblebees. Have a great summer. All right, hopefully we struggled through that together. Okay, there's some great questions here in the question and answer that I wanted to address live. I answered a lot more by typing in there, so you may want to scroll through and see some of the questions that were answered, written if you go to the answered tab there. So the first question that I'm just going to talk about here is, what's the difference between a point and a roadside survey? That's a good question, and I didn't really address it in this video. A roadside survey, so a point survey is the one I described here. It's a hectare survey, it's 45 minutes long, and you're gonna do the whole survey in that one area. A roadside survey is different, and these are really helpful for people that may have less mobility, that can't get to a large open meadow, or it could be helpful in private land, because the rights of way along the sides of roads are public access, and you can go do surveys in those rights of ways if you need to. So the great part about roadside surveys is they are more easily accessible. The bad side to them is they do tend to be laden with invasive plants, and they're more disturbed habitats. But if it's the only place that you can conduct a survey, you can feel free to do it. But what you're going to do is you're going to pick a 10-mile stretch of road, and along that, when you get to that 10-mile stretch of road, you are going to start driving until you find a patch of flowers that's big enough to survey for around 15 minutes. And that can depend on, it might depend on how dense the flowers are. It doesn't really need to be a minimum size. There just needs to be a bunch of flowers there. And then you're going to do a survey for 10 minutes there, and you're going to continue on like that, and do a full survey there, as well as a full habitat survey, just like I just described in the video here. So you're going to do a full survey, and then you're going to get in your car and you're going to drive for at least a half of a mile. When you're done with your habitat and bumblebee survey and you've released the bumblebees at that location, you're going to get back in your car and you're going to drive at least a half of a mile and then start looking for your next flower patch. And you're going to continue that along doing that until you've done five surveys. So that is a roadside survey. It's a 10-mile stretch of road and 5 shorter surveys along that 10-mile stretch of road. There are also, I really encourage you, this is obviously a training workshop and we want to address the questions, but there are a ton of resources available on the website, including the training handbook. Katie, could you share a link to the training handbook in the chat here when you get a chance? It is, if you can read everything in that book. It describes how to do all of these surveys. So feel free to use those written resources to find more information as well. There's a question here that says, do bees ever sting while being touched? When bees are chilled, like we saw them in the video, when they're chilled to the point of not being mobile, I have never been stung nor heard of anybody being stung with a chilled bee. I have never even been stung by holding a bee as it's warmed up. I often will hold them in my hand. You saw a picture of my daughter holding in that video. She loves it. She never gets stung. You know, if you try to grab a bee off of a flower or a live bee that's fully awake, yes, if that bee feels threatened, it will sting you. But I've I've caught and handled probably 10,000, well, 10,000 might be high. I've handled a lot of bees in my life. And, you know, I've been stung maybe 5 times. And every time that I've been stung that I can think of right now, the bee was in the net. So it's that process of transferring the bee from the net to the jar where you're most likely to get stung. But I still think, you know, bumblebees are incredibly docile creatures and you're very unlikely to get stung. How long do they need to be in the cooler before they slow down? That will depend on how cold your cooler is. So if you have a bunch of crushed ice and you can get the jar submerged in that ice, or at least down, you know, we want to keep the top from getting under there because we don't want the bees to get wet. But if you can get it deep down in that jar, they'll chill down in less than 5 minutes or 5 to 10 minutes or so. If it's, you know, if you're just using blue ice or something like that, they can take quite a bit longer. And there was a bunch of questions for about how long they can stay in the ice. And they can stay in the ice for a very long time. I had a colleague that accidentally left one in his cooler overnight, and the next day released her and she warmed up and flew away just fine. It's basically putting them in a state of torpor. And they wake up. And I'm not saying that bee that was in there overnight went on and lived a normal life. She was likely impacted in some way, but you know, they're pretty hardy creatures, and certainly an hour would be just fine for a bee to stay in a cooler in ice. I've never, in all of my years of doing these ice-based surveys, I have not lost a bee from being in the ice. So it's a very safe protocol. When surveying, do we need to be considerate of bumblebee pests and transmission between our specimens? I think this is a great question. I'm glad that somebody asked it. Within one site, you know, a pretty close location, I wouldn't worry about it. But if you're moving between sites, like relatively long distances, I would sanitize your jars in between them. You can do that by, you know, putting them in boiling water, or using an alcohol solution or a bleach solution and just letting that evaporate. So that is a good idea to sanitize in between surveys, especially if you're going to be traveling relatively large distances between your survey sites. We do want to avoid, sorry about that. I had turned my video off during the video and I forgot to turn it back on. We do want to avoid moving diseases around if we can. When time is recorded and when not during this protocol. So with the protocol, you're going to start the timer at the beginning of the survey, and you're going to walk around until you see a bee, and then you're going to grab that bee in your net. And then as soon as you get that bee in the net, your next step should be to pause the timer. And then you're going to keep the timer paused until you get that bee into the jar, and you get the jar into the cooler. And then once you start looking for bumblebees again, you can restart the timer. And it's going to be 45 person minutes for those surveys. There was something else I wanted to say as I was saying that, and now I'm losing track of my thought. Oh, I was just, sometimes, like, if there's a bunch of bees, I won't return to the cooler in between every one that I find. Sometimes I might wait until I get 3 or 4 bees in my pocket, or sometimes I carry a little fanny pack and I'll wait until I get 3 or 4 bees and then take them all to the cooler at the same time and posit them. So you don't have to go to the cooler in between every one. But if it's a hot, sunny day, the bumblebees can get affected and warm up way too quickly in those jars. So you don't want to keep them in a jar too long. Cleaning the net is also a good idea. It's probably more important to clean the plastic jars because diseases will live longer on plastic than they will in net. But yes, throwing your net in a washing machine is not a bad idea either. No, if there's two people with one net and it's really only able to capture, you really want to just, that would be 45 minutes. There are some bumblebees in wooded areas, particularly if there's forbs growing in the understory. That plant, water leaf that I showed you in the video, that plant does have does grow in the understory. So sometimes that might be worthwhile. But mostly we're going to be looking in open areas. It certainly wouldn't do a survey in a dense forest. It's it's kind of an open park-like setting that you might find in a ponderosa pine forest with forbs underneath might be worth doing, but not a dense forest. Okay. Lynn's asking a question about wilderness or remote surveys where you might not be able to use ice or carry ice for that long. There's a couple of options. One of them is to use those ice packs that you have for like sports teams, to bring some of those along and actually break those. Snow is also fantastic. It's actually the best thing that you can possibly use to chill bees if you can find snow. It works super fast. And the final option, I don't really want to describe on the webinar because it's a bit tricky. But if you're sort of an experienced biologist of sorts, I can share some options with you for doing remote surveys. If you send me an email directly, and you can send that to bumblebees, all one word, at xerces.org. Okay. In terms of permission to survey on Forest Service land, you don't, for most federal public lands, you do not need any permission. You can just go do a survey. If you're going to a national park, or you're going to a state park, or you're going to a wildlife refuge, those are areas that may require special permissions. And so I would encourage you to reach out to the land manager to ask for permissions, or this is an area where Joel or Ann might be able to help you about the regulations in your state. So please reach out to us and use us as resources, but on BLM land and Forest Service land, you don't need any permission. The best time of day and weather conditions for surveying, again, bees pretty much use banker's hours, so we tend to survey between 9 and 5 and between 70 and 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, I'm going to move on now. I'm going to show you another video. The next video is how to, after you've collected your data, how do you submit it to the website? And hopefully this one, I think, will display a little bit better. And so hopefully we can just go ahead and play it. But again, if there are problems with the video or you're struggling, you can come back. This particular video is also around 26 minutes long. So if you want to take a break and the video doesn't work for you, you can come back around 3 o'clock or 3:05 and check back in with us. So here we go. I'm going to share this with how to submit your data once you've collected it. Hi, my name is Rich Hatfield. I'm a senior conservation biologist for the Xerces Society for Invertebrate Conservation, and I'm here to teach you how to submit your bumblebee and habitat data to our databases for our Bumblebee Atlas projects, including the Pacific Northwest Bumblebee Atlas and the Nebraska Bumblebee Atlas. To do that, you're going to go here to Bumblebee Watch, And Bumblebee Watch can be found at the URL bumblebeewatch, all one word, no spaces, .org. And once you're there, you can navigate around and look around. You're going to need an account, and if you don't already have one, you'll need to register or log in if you already have an account. And once you're logged in, we would really appreciate it if you would go to your profile page just to make sure that you are registered for the Pacific Northwest Bumblebee Atlas or the Nebraska Bumblebee Atlas. And to do that, you are going to click on the your profile name or your username in the upper portion of the window there. So at the very top, you're going to click on welcome and whatever your username is. And in this case, I'm going to click on welcome RG Hatfield, which is my username on Bumblebee Watch. And then once you're at your profile page, you can edit your profile page by clicking on edit in the upper left-hand corner. And then if you scroll all the way to the bottom, it'll show you what project you're registered for. If you haven't changed this before, it will just say Bumblebee Watch. But we're asking that you click here and choose whatever project that you're working on, whether it's Pacific Northwest Bumblebee Atlas, Nebraska Bumblebee Atlas, or some other Atlas project that maybe we launch in the future. And then if you click Save, it'll save that project, and then you can begin to enter your Bumblebee data once you're saved there. So you can go to Record a Sighting and choose Bumblebee Sighting. And then it'll take you to the first page. And this is the page where you're going to enter your photos. You'll upload them there. And then also where you'll enter the site information and also talk about the flower host and other observations that you made. So the first thing you want to do is to upload your photos. And you have two options. You can just drag the photos from an open window into this gray box here, and it would upload the photo automatically, or you can choose files, and then it will open a window on your computer or whatever device you're using, and it will help you navigate to those photos. So if you click choose photos here, it'll open up the window, and you can see that I have my photos that are already organized sort of by year and by date. And so right when I get home from a survey, I like to download all of my pictures from my camera onto my computer and have them organized this way, which really helps me to enter my data later. So you want to make sure that you have your data sheet along with you so you can choose the right pictures for the first bee that you're entering. In this case, 2319 versus 2324 were the photos that I took. And you notice there's 6 photos there, but I can only enter 3 into Bumblebee Watch. So I want to make sure to be really careful and select the best 3 photos that I have. In this case, because I have a yellow face, yellow striped bee, I want to make sure to include that photo of the underside of the abdomen, of those sternal hairs. That's really important to distinguish between a few close lookalikes. So I'm going to choose that one, and then I'll choose this photo, which shows the cheek length and the face, and then I'll choose this profile one that shows the head, thorax, and all of the segments on the abdomen. And then I can click open, and it will automatically start entering all of those photos into the database. And it'll show you the progress of all those and tell you whether they're uploaded or not on the far right there. You don't have to sit and watch this. You can start entering your location information, and then you'll get updates with little green flashes as those update. So now you're going to scroll down and start entering your location information. You can either directly enter the latitude and longitude on the right, or you can use the map on the left to enter a location using Google Maps, and it will zoom into you. Or if you've already visited a site before and you're re-entering, you can type the location name in this box up here, and it will automatically enter the location. You'll see us do that later after we've already uploaded one. And you can see there I just got an update that one of my photos has uploaded. So I'm going to use the map here, and I'm just going to start typing in the location. This survey was conducted at the Oregon Zoo, so I'm just going to type that in. And if I click on the location, it will automatically zoom into that place. And then I can switch over to satellite view, and then I can actually find the exact location where I located. So you click zoom in, and you can drag and drop it a little bit until you find the right spot. And then you can click on the map, and it will automatically drop a pin, and then enter the latitude, longitude, and state into the database. The next thing that you want to do is to give this location a site name. In this case, I'm going to call it Arboretum Video. And you just want to be really consistent and make sure you're entering the same site name for the bumblebee information and for the habitat information. That helps us be really consistent in the database. So please try to be careful and use the same name and same spelling and spacing between the two. The next one is to enter this question, how accurate is the location? And what that's really asking is, how far from this red dot might you have traveled when you collected a bumblebee? Was it within 5 meters? Was it maybe as far as 100 meters? How close to that dot were you? In this case, since this plot was a hectare, I know that I probably wasn't further than 50 meters from there. So I'm going to choose 25 to 50 meters, and you probably would too. Next, I'm going to enter the date. This survey was conducted on April 17th, so I'm going to select that. And then there's that little box right below the date there, and that's a private option. So if you didn't want this location to show up on a map because it was on some property that you own, or for whatever reason, you could just click that private box, and that would make it viewable to experts like myself, but it wouldn't show up on the public map. Then you want to enter the floral host. In this case, it wasn't visiting a flower, it was nest searching. So I'm just going to enter nest searching there. And here you can enter any observation notes if you have any. Don't feel like you need to, but you can, especially since you're submitting habitat data separately. You don't really necessarily need to fill this part in. Here you want to check the photo permission box, which agrees to the Creative Commons license. And so make sure you click in that box. You won't be able to submit a sighting if you don't. And then if you didn't take the photos, please enter the photographer in that box right below that. And then here, if you haven't selected PNW Bumblebee Atlas or whatever Atlas project is your project, you can select it here just to indicate that you're submitting these to the Atlas project. But it's nicer just to have it as a default, and then you don't have to worry about that, which is what we did on the profile page in the beginning of this video. And you click next, and it will take you to our interactive identification guide. So you can see there on the left the photos that you've uploaded, and then in the middle here is the option where you're going to choose the features that you see, and then on the far right is the possible bumblebees. And this list of bumblebees has already been narrowed down by your location. So the map has already chosen the possible species that could be found in that area, and you can further refine it by choosing the features that you see on the bee. So I can go over here and start looking at some of my photos and see what I see, and then enter those features in there. So in this case, if I look here, I see that this bee has a yellow face, and I choose yellow face, and it narrows down the options and gets rid of bees that don't have a yellow face. And now I look at its thorax, and I can see that the thorax has yellow at the front of the thorax, and then the rest of the thorax is black. So I can choose yellow in front, and then it further narrows down the options. And then if I look at the abdomen, I can see that abdomen has a yellow stripe. So I can choose yellow stripe under abdomen, and again, it will further narrow the options down. And in this case, since this bee has black hairs on the underside of its abdomen and that yellow stripe, I can choose Bombus vosnesenskii because I know that's the species. And then you can scroll down and click submit, and you will have entered your data into the database. And if you have more bees to enter, like we do in our situation, we can go to record a sighting and just click Bumblebee sighting again and start entering a new sighting. So you're going to choose the photos for your second bee, which in this case is 2325 to 2327, according to my data sheet. And now that I've already entered that location once, I can select a previous location. So I just start typing in there, and it will bring up all of my previous locations. And I just want to zoom in to make sure that it's the right place. And indeed it is. It's by the Oregon Zoo and it's in the same area where I just clicked, which is great. And then you're going to choose the accuracy again and enter the correct date of the sighting. Enter the floral host or nest searching or whatever information is appropriate. Click that photo permission box and then next, and then I'm back to my identification guide. And in this case, it has a yellow face. It has a black band between the wings there, so I'm going to choose that. And then this one has a red tail, so I'm going to choose red tail and it will narrow it down. In this case, I've got Bombus mixtus. And then I can click next, and my second bee is already entered. You can see how this gets faster as we move along. Choose record a sighting, and then I want to enter those last photos of this last bee, which were the photos 2328 to 2331. I choose the 3 best of them, click open, and it automatically starts entering those in the database. And again, I can go down and start typing the location in there, click that. It will automatically enter the data in the database. I choose the accuracy and the date, and then I can scroll down and enter the floral host again. In this case, this bee was visiting a dandelion, so I want to type in the either the common or the scientific name of dandelion, and then click the photo permission box and next, and I'm back to the identification page. I choose yellow face, yellow in front, yellow stripe. It narrows down those options. I choose Bombus valsensensky, and then I choose next. Note that if you don't know what it is, you can always choose not sure, and that will just enter this is Bumblebee and leave the identification up to the experts, which you're more than welcome to do. But now you're done. You've entered all of your data in the database for your bumblebees, and you can move on and start collecting your habitat data. So let's go do that. Now that you are done entering your Bumblebee data, you can enter your habitat data into the Bumblebee Atlas website. And in order to do that, you're going to go to the home page. In this case, I went to pnwbumblebeeatlas.org. You might go to nebraskabumblebeeatlas.org or another Bumblebee Atlas project if one gets launched. And you're going to go to the Data tab and choose Habitat Data Entry. And that'll bring up the form embedded in the website. And this is a little, I'll be honest, I find this a little funky to have a scrolling window within a larger window. So what I like to do is just click on this link here, which will open the form in its own window. And then once that form is open, you're basically just going to be transferring the data from your data sheet into this form here. There is some introductory information here in the beginning. So you're just going to type your name and your email address. Please make sure to use the same email address that you have used throughout the rest of the other projects. So the same one you used to adopt a grid cell and the same one that is associated with your Bumblebee Watch account. Then you're going to enter your Bumblebee Watch username and your home zip code. Then you're going to enter the survey data, and most of this data is going to be right on your data sheet. So the site name. And again, you want to use the same site name that you used when you enter your Bumblebee data. Make sure it's almost exactly the same if you can. The date of the survey, which was April 17, whether it was a point survey or a road survey. In this case, we did a point survey. The grid cell ID. My survey took place in Oregon 22, so I'm going to choose that. The start time of my survey, which was 3:45 p.m. And then it's going to take you to the map. And this is where you can enter the location of your survey into the map. And we want to be sure to use the same latitude and longitude at which we entered our Bumblebee data. So the best thing to do there is to go back to Bumblebee Watch. So if you open up a new window with Bumblebee Watch in there, then Then you can just go to your profile or go to Explore Data and choose B List. And then if you enter yourself as the observer in this box right here, you can filter the observations to only see your own in that box. And then you need to find the one from that survey. So here's my Arboretum video sighting. And here is one of the bees from that. And the latitude and longitude where I submitted my bee data is right there. So I can copy that information by doing Control C, or I can right click and then choose copy. Or if you're on a Mac, you could use Apple Copy. However you want to copy those data is great. And then go back over to your PNW habitat survey, and you can paste that information by doing Control V or right click paste, or however you do it on your device, and then hit enter, and it should zoom directly into that site. And you want to make sure that it's the same location where you submit it, that you didn't make some error in the process. But for me, that's definitely where I did the bumblebee survey, so I'm good. If for some reason you can't find the latitude and longitude, or it's just not working from you, you can use this map the same way that you would other. You can zoom, you can drag and drop, you can use this search bar in the same way that you would in the same way that you would a Google map, where you click on it and it'll zoom into it. And drop that pin in that location. But the best thing to do is to get the same latitude and longitude that you used for your bumblebee data and hit enter, and it will enter that exact same spot into the map, which will make finding your habitat data and your bumblebee data much easier for the team that's analyzing the data. Then you scroll down and you're going to enter the number of bumblebees that you found in your survey. In this case, we saw 3. And then it's going to ask whether you submitted your bumblebee data to Bumblebee Watch. Yes, we have. And then here, to further help us associate your bumblebee data from your survey with the habitat data, we're going to ask you to go back to your to Bumblebee Watch and copy the URL from that site. So you're going to go back to Bumblebee Watch, and you're going to choose one of the records from that survey, the same one where you just got the latitude and longitude is perfect. You're going to click on the bee ID, and then you're just going to copy the URL from the search browser from the top here, and then navigate back to the habitat form, and you're going to just paste that in there. So the same Control C, Control V to paste that in there, or however you would normally do that. And then now I know that that's one bumblebee observation from your sighting, from your survey. If you didn't see any bumblebees in your site, you would check this box here, and then this option would never show up, and it shouldn't pose a problem for you. So that's just where you would indicate that you did not observe any bumblebees. Of course, you'd also have a 0 in this box up here. Then you're just going to be transferring information from your data sheet to the form here. So you're going to enter in the temperature, the average wind speed, the percent cover, any weather notes that you had here. So you could say, in this case, it was a warm, sunny day. You could add that in there. If it was windy, you might want to tell us that, or if it was cloudy, or if the weather changed during the course of your survey, you might want to add some information in there. And then you could add any site description that you put on your data sheet. Here I'm just going to describe the habitat briefly, which will also come here. And then you're gonna again, right from your data sheet, you're gonna select whatever you circled there. In this case, it was a natural area in a park setting. And then you're gonna choose the surrounding areas as well. So there was some developed park around there, a natural area with a park setting, and then there was also some woodland surrounding it. Next, it's how much of the area had flowering resources available. I circled 10 to 20. You can choose whichever one was closer of your survey. In this case, I think it was right in between. I'm going to round up and say 20%. Which of the following features did you see in or near the survey area? Again, this has just come directly off of the habitat form that you filled out when you were in the field. So in this case, I didn't see any bunch grasses, but I did see rodent holes, I did see brush piles, I did see bare soil, I did see leaf litter, I did see pine needle duff. I did not see any rock piles. If you saw none of those features, you would just click this option here at the very bottom. If you are filling out this form for the Nebraska Bumblebee Atlas, you may or likely would, or you might likely would see different options here, and that's okay. Just copy the information from your data sheet to this form. The form will be different at the Nebraska Bumblebee Atlas site. So make sure you're using the right site. And then you're going to answer the questions about management. So yes, I saw mowing. There was no cattle grazing. I suspected that there was native grazing, no agriculture, no insecticide use, no herbicide use, no controlled wildfire, and I didn't see any honeybee hives when I was there. If you had any notes here about the chemicals that were used, or about the fire, or about how many honeybees you observed, you could put that here in this notes box. Next, we're going to move on to floral resources, and here you're just going to check how many flowers that you observed on the landscape, or how many different species of flowers. I saw 5 to 10, so I'm going to check that. And then we're going to enter which plants that we actually saw. And it's important to note that you don't have to enter into this form the same species of flowers that you entered when you entered your bumblebee data. So remember, when we entered our bumblebee data, we entered the host plant. So we already have that information. We already know that bumblebees were seen visiting it. So we don't have to re-enter those data here. And this is a bit of a different protocol from last year and the year before. So if you've participated before, hopefully this will make things a little bit easier for you. But also, this should simplify things a little bit. And then you're just going to scroll down and you're going to copy the information from your data sheet, and this is on the back of the data sheet, to the form here. So you're just going to enter the common name and then the plant species name. And please do your best to be consistent with your spelling between surveys. There are so many different spellings, especially of common names, and that's the reason we ask you to enter the species name if you can. So please do your best to find out what the specific name is and enter it in there to the best of your ability. And then you can move on to plant 2, and this one was a false dandelion. And in this case, I don't know what the species name was. I'm just going to put the genus down here. I was a little bit lazy when I did my survey because I was focusing on filming and making this educational, so I didn't do my due diligence. So hopefully you'll be better than me when you conduct your survey. Plant 3 was the dandelion, and I don't need to enter that one because a bumblebee was seen observing, and I already entered that information into the Bumblebee Watch database. And then I'm done entering my plant data. If you had more, you could click on these arrows and it would open up additional options all the way up through plant 15 here. And then it asks if you were a volunteer when you were conducting the survey. If you say no here, you're just going to sign and be done, which would be what I would do, because I wasn't actually volunteering when I did this. I was working or being paid to do this. If you're being paid to do this, you would say no here. I think most of you will probably answer yes to this question, and then it'll just enter the next page where you're going to enter your volunteer data. So you're going to say how many people participated in this survey. My daughter helped me with this survey. And then it says, so I'm going to enter 2 people here. And then it says, considering all volunteers, how many hours did you spend traveling to and from and conducting the survey? So for myself, it was probably around 3 hours, and my daughter also 3 hours. So in this box, I would enter 6 hours. If your travel took place on a different day than your survey, you would enter that before. So in other words, if you traveled to a different part of the state, you would enter that here. Or if you traveled one day and then did the survey the next day and then traveled home the third day, you might enter a third date. Most of you will probably just not fill these out because you will probably have traveled, done your survey, and then traveled home on the same day. These are just an option if it was a multi-day trip. And then how many miles round trip did you drive to conduct your survey? For me, this was relatively close. It was probably about 6 miles. And then I have done all of my survey data, and I'm done. And then it says now, by signing below, you certify that all details in the survey are correct to the best of my ability. And so then I'm just going to go down here, and using my mouse, I'm going to sign the box. And then I'm all done, and I can click submit, and it will give me a confirmation that I've submitted my data correctly. Just to show you what would happen, if I click submit and I haven't filled out all the data, it will take you back and actually let you know that you have not submitted your data correctly and that you have to fix that before you move forward. So there's a lot of required questions that you have to answer before you submit the data. So you can go ahead and then fix it and then click submit, and you'll get a confirmation that you have submitted your data correctly. And there you go. And if you need to enter another habitat survey, you can click here to do that, and then go on. And that's it. Now you've entered your bumblebee data and your habitat data, and you should be all done. So thanks so much for watching and for submitting your data and for conducting surveys for the Bumblebee Atlas project. And again, I hope you're out there staying safe and only conducting surveys if it's appropriate, and it's your state and local officials and healthcare professionals have agreed that it's the right thing to do, and you feel like it's best for your personal health, or you feel like it's okay for your personal health to go out and do this. Again, please don't jeopardize yourself to do bumblebee surveys. We've got time in front of us to do that, and we can come back to this. The most important thing is that you and your community stay healthy and safe. So again, thank you so much for participating today, and thanks so much for collecting and submitting your data for us. Take care. Okay, so that's it. Now you're all trained up, ready to go out and collect data and submit it to us. There's a couple good questions here that came up and things I realized I didn't address in the videos, which is great. That's why we do this in live. So good question in a landscape where there's just a lot of bees. What should you focus on? Or it's a similar question: if I catch 5 of the same bee, what should I do? So if you're in a landscape where there's just a ton of bees, if you're in there are people that have done surveys in lavender where, there's hundreds of bees and there's just no way you could sample all of them. If that is the case, what you want to do is really try to catch for diversity. What the main focus is you want to try to get 10 lookalike species, because there are a lot of lookalikes. We're about to go through the species to the best of our ability here in a little bit. And you'll see there are a lot of lookalikes. So you want to get at least 10 of ones that you think look the same. And then when you take photos, we'll know better whether they were the same species or whether they were different species. So, so grab 10, and then you can move on and try to focus on diversity. Similarly, when you're submitting your data, there's a question: do you need to submit all 10 of those bees, or if you have 10 that are the same? If you're 100% confident that they're the same, and you feel like you're a bumblebee identification expert and you can put the right name on the species, then go ahead and you can just put the number that you saw in the chat, or actually contact me, and I can elevate your account and give you an option to submit your data using what's called a checklist option. But we're really only reserving that for people that are truly bumblebee experts. So otherwise, yes, please submit each observation, because there are some very close lookalike species. The way to find the perimeter of your grid cell is the best way to do that is to go to the website. So if you go to pnwbumblebeeatlas.org and then go to adopt a grid cell, you can see the map. So hopefully you can still see my screen here. This is why I didn't switch it, Ann, is because I wanted to share my screen here. And once the map comes up, you can use this to find your location. You can type your address in this box right here, and it would zoom in. Like I'll type in the address of the office. In Portland here, and it will zoom into that location. And now I can zoom out and see what grid cell that I'm in. And if I want to explore around, I can see the grids of it there, and I can see the edges of it, and you can click which layers that you want on and off here. So if those layers get annoying and you don't want to see the outside of it anymore, you can turn some of those layers off. You can also change this over here so that you can actually look what the imagery looks like and explore your site within, close to your location. So that's the best way to interact with the map and the grid cells. There's also a number of questions about how often do we need to conduct surveys. When you adopt a grid cell, you're agreeing that you're going to conduct 2 surveys within your grid cell this year in 2020. And that could be 2 surveys in a different location on the same day, or it could be 2 surveys at the same location separated by time, so on different days. Or it could be 2 different sites on 2 different days. That's fine too. That's the minimum. You can also answer as many possible questions, you can survey as many times as you want. If you want to do 50 or you want to go once a week, that's great. We'll get a lot more data and a lot more information from that, but 2 is the minimum.